opening in my.
Yeah, now it's gone to live stream.
But so there is one. Okay, YouTube link is already opening here. I can
Yes,
I
you
can
are here.
close that, na?
Yeah, you can close now.
I
You are
I,
visible there.
I am visible there. Okay. So now we are visible. Okay, fine.
Hello, Ram.
Yeah. Good afternoon.
Hello.
Good
What?
afternoon,
Good
Ashok.
afternoon.
Hello, Ram.
Yeah. Hello. Hello. Can you hear me, Ashok?
Hello.
Ashok, can you hear us?
Hello, Ashok.
Ashok.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Ram.
Yeah. Ashok, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Should I try to screen the, I mean, to see
Yes.
the,
We are checking the YouTube live also with Kishore. Kishore, if I want to stop it, I can stop live stream. Ashok,
yeah. Oh,
you have
let me,
no problem if we live stream or record your.
no problem.
No
Just,
problem.
I'm seeing that why this is not coming. I put some animations here.
Yeah.
Live streaming
Why
is.
animations are not coming?
Yeah, you can stop at any time.
No, it's not coming. So let's see. It's coming. Yeah.
Yeah, live streaming has started.
You're audible, yes.
So, should I start?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So, my topic is understanding natural farming. So, natural farming is a system of agriculture which uses only the naturally available inputs. The profit earned through natural farming is often higher than that earned through conventional farming because the natural inputs do not cost anything. Since 1970, I have been trying to develop methods of using the natural inputs more efficiently. I take this opportunity to tell you about it.
Yeah.
We shall start this narration with two strategies
Absolutely.
developed by me. We shall start this narration with two strategies developed by me to use rainwater more effectively. A north-south belt in Maharashtra, comprising parts of the districts of Nashik, Ahmednagar, Pune, Satara, Sangli, and Solapur, is called the rain shadow region because it receives scanty rainfall of only 150 millimeters from the southwestern monsoon and about 350 millimeters in September from the northeastern monsoon. A total rainfall of 500 millimeters is generally enough for one monsoon season crop, but the uneven distribution of the rainfall prevents it. The farmers therefore keep their fields fallow during monsoon, allowing the rainwater to be stored in the soil. In the month of September, they sow the seed of a local variety of sorghum, which is supposed to grow on the moisture stored in the soil. Actually, for storing 500 millimeters of rainwater, one needs at least 2-meter deep soil, but the average soil depth in this region is less than 1 meter. Thus, the water stored in the soil is insufficient for a crop which stands in the field for 4 months. The farmers keep a row-to-row spacing of 30 centimeters in their sorghum, whereas I kept the row-to-row spacing at 150 centimeters. At this spacing, the plants could extract water not only from the vertical layer of soil, but also from the horizontal layer of soil between the wide rows of the crop. This strategy worked successfully. My experimental crop yielded 2,500 kilograms grain per hectare, whereas the sorghum of my neighboring farmers dried out even before flowering. Nowadays, Mahatma Phule Agricultural University recommends a row-to-row spacing of 1 meter for non-irrigated post-monsoon sorghum. Another example is that of rain-fed cotton in Vidarbha. The best time of planting cotton is the first week of June, but because the monsoon starts in Vidarbha by the end of June, the cotton seed cannot be sown before the first week of July. I planted the seed of cotton in the first week of June into plastic bags filled with soil and watered them by hand. Once the rain started and the land was sufficiently moist, the seedlings were transplanted into the field. The transplanted cotton plants gave 80% more yield than the cotton raised from seed sown in July. This method is nowadays widely used by cotton farmers in Khandesh and Vidarbha. Another free input that plants receive from nature is light. Since everybody is aware of photosynthesis, I won't discuss it. I shall discuss other phenomena which are relatively unknown and on which I have personally worked. One of them is the effect of light on the development of plants. Plants generally produce flowers only on organs exposed to daylight. Whenever a plant is shaded, it stops the development of branches, flowers, and fruits and just grows tall in order to grow out of the shade. Under high population density, the plants shade each other and therefore instead of developing fruits, they just grow tall. The panicles of cereals are produced at the apex of the stem. This site is always exposed to the sun. Therefore, cereals can be planted under a high population density. However, maize, which bears its cobs below the leaf canopy, represents an exception. If the maize crop is planted too densely, the cob formation is suppressed. Some of the modern varieties of maize can be planted more densely because they have short leaves having an upright orientation. The dicotyledonous plants like cotton, sunflower, tomato, etc. cannot be planted as densely as the cereals because they bear their flowers and fruits below the canopy of leaves. But in spite of having pods that are borne below the leaf canopy, leguminous crops are planted almost as densely as cereals. I proposed the hypothesis that because the legumes fold their leaves in the late afternoon, they allow sunlight to illuminate all parts of the plant. This light induces the development of flowers and fruits on all nodes, even when they are shaded throughout the day. I proved this hypothesis by conducting appropriate experiments. The fact that plants produce flowers and fruits only on those parts which receive light is demonstrated by trees that grow near a house wall. Such a tree produces its flowers and fruits on the side opposite to the wall. This example explains why crop rows should be oriented in the north-south direction. Plants in such rows are exposed in the forenoon to sunlight from the east and in the afternoon to light from the west. If the rows were to be in the east-west direction, the plants would receive light either on the southern side or on the northern side, depending upon the season. It is an interesting fact that weed seeds need light for germination, whereas the seeds of cultivated plants can germinate even in darkness. A Japanese scientist by the name of Fukuoka recommended that in a rice and wheat rotation, the rice should be harvested by removing only the top half of the plants. When seed of wheat is sown in the rice stubble, it germinates, but the wheat seeds being shaded by the rice stubble do not. When the rice stubble is removed, The weed seeds are exposed to light, inducing them to germinate, but they are unable to compete with wheat, which has had an early start. Another phenomenon related to light is that of the day length, which varies according to seasons. Many of our local varieties of cotton, sesame, and sorghum, and most varieties of pigeon pea flower in October or November when the days have become short. Also, their fruits develop under short day conditions. This is a strategy by which these plants avoid their fruits and seeds from being attacked by insect pests. When the days are long, the insects multiply once every 3 weeks. But under short day conditions, many of them go into dormancy and remain dormant till the onset of monsoon. As a result, the insect attack on the crop is much severe during the period of fruit development. With that, we come to the topic of mixed cropping. In mixed cropping, two crop species are grown simultaneously in the same field. The seed of both the crops is sown with the onset of monsoon, but one of the two crops is late maturing. The plants having late maturity generally grow large in size. Therefore, they are planted at a wide row-to-row spacing. This allows a short duration crop to be grown in the intervening space. After the early maturing crop has been harvested, the late maturing crop grows to occupy the entire field, giving its full potential yield. The income from the early maturing crop is an extra bonus. If the field is divided into two halves and the two crops are planted separately as sole crops, one would get only half the yield from each crop. I cite here the example of a mixed crop of pearl millet and pigeon pea, that is bajra and arhar. Both the crops are sown simultaneously in the month of June or July. Pigeon pea, which takes about 6 to 7 months to mature, is planted in rows 180 centimeters apart. Pearl millet, which matures in about 90 days, occupies the space between the rows of pigeon pea. Actual experiments have shown that while pearl millet yields almost 80% of its potential yield, the pigeon pea gives its full normal yield. Also, sugarcane, a long duration crop, allows a number of short duration crops such as onion, potato, radish, groundnut, cabbage, early maturing maize, leafy vegetables, etc., to be grown as companion crops. While one gets the full yield from sugarcane, the income from the short duration companion crop is an extra bonus. I have also worked on natural pesticides. Farmers spend a lot of money on chemical pesticides. There exist in nature almost 100,000 species of insects which feed on plants. The number of organisms that cause plant diseases is even larger, but only a few species of insects and fungi are seen on any one plant species. Actually, all plants possess insecticides and fungicides of their own, which protect them from almost all the insects and pathogens. But in the course of evolution, some of the insect pests and pathogens developed resistance to the naturally occurring biocides in plants. Since the insecticides and fungicides produced by each plant species are unique, the insects and the fungal pathogens are both unique to each plant species. The fact that the caterpillar of the silkworm eat only mulberry leaves and not the leaves of any other plant is a good example of this phenomenon. It is theoretically possible to kill the insect pests of one plant by exposing them to an extract of another species of plants. The use of tobacco decoction and neem seed extract as insecticides is based on the same principle. But it should be noted that tobacco decoction would not kill the insects feeding on tobacco, and similarly, neem similarly, neem seed extract would not kill the insects feeding on neem. Armed with this knowledge, we can now search for local plants which can serve as source of insecticides. But before advocating their use as general pesticides, it would be necessary to establish their safety to humans and also to other beneficial living beings. These toxicological studies are very costly, and that is the main reason why the indigenous development of plant based pesticides has come to naught. In response to an attack by fungal pathogens, plant cells generally synthesize chitinase enzyme. It kills the fungal pathogens by dissolving its cell wall, which is made of chitin. Chitin is also present in prawn shells, which are available as a waste product which, with units that export prawns. I could show in the case of tomato that application of prawn shell powder to the soil rendered the crop resistant to many fungal diseases. While we are on the topic of insecticides produced by plants, let me tell the audience that it was well known since 1950 that the roots of all plants exude biocides into the soil. They kill not only the bacteria but also fungi, protozoa, nematodes, and insect larvae. Almost 60% of the Ayurvedic formulations are based on roots. It was generally believed that the biocides produced by roots protected plants from pests and pathogens in the soil, but I argued that plants might also be using the biocides to kill and consume the microorganisms in the soil in order to get the necessary minerals. This assumption was supported by experiments in our laboratory which showed that the population density of soil bacteria got depleted by about 75% when plants were raised in the soil for a period of just 40 days. Further support was provided by a water purification technology called the root zone technology. In this technology, domestic sewage is passed through a bed of soil having plants. This treatment removes almost all the bacteria from the sewage water. Armed with this knowledge, I showed that it was possible to grow crops by supplying them solely with bacteria. Application of any digestible organic material to the soil serves the soil bacteria as a carbon source, which induces them to proliferate. During proliferation, they take up minerals from the soil. Thus, by keeping a mixture of sugar and moist soil in a tank for a day, one can increase the number of bacteria in the soil, and this soil is then applied to a standing crop instead of a chemical fertilizer. Although the bacteria differ from soil to soil, all of them have the same minerals in their cytoplasm, so it is immaterial which bacteria are consumed by the plants. A seasonal crop is generally provided with 100 kilograms N, 50 kilograms K2O, and 50 kilograms P2O5 per hectare. As chemical fertilizers, this dose would cost about rupees 7,500. If one used the soil in one's own field and produced bacteria by adding biodegradable waste from one's own household or farm, it would cost nothing to feed the plants with bacteria. This would naturally raise the profit of the farmers. The fact that biocides in roots kill and consume not just the bacteria, but also insect larvae explains why the swarming locusts lay their eggs in the desert. Were they to lay their eggs in the soil having plants, the roots of the plants would kill and consume the larvae. Thank you. If there are any questions, I am ready to answer them.
Yeah, maybe Ashok, you can ask your question directly.
Yeah, surely. Uh, Sir, a very nice overview of the work and importance of agriculture. My question is generally the plants which are crop plants, which are went through the process of domestication, are highly susceptible. So I feel that something happened during the process of domestication that they are susceptible to the diseases as well as pests. So what is your opinion on this?
No, you are quite right. After all these, most of the substances that protect plants from insects and fungal diseases are phenolic compounds belonging to a group called tannins. The tannins impart uh, bitter or astringent taste to the plants. So when people selected plants as food, they naturally selected plants having low tannin content. And that's why they tasted better, but they became more susceptible to insects and diseases.
Any other questions?
Yeah, can I?
Murthy, yeah.
Yeah.
Please.
Dr. Karve, you said that mix sugar and sand and then you apply on the soil. Is it possible to apply sugar itself dissolved in water and water the plants?
Uh, well, we tried it, but what happens is that uh, the sugar serves the bacteria that are present in the soil as food, but the bacteria need the minerals also. So there is a competition between the plants and the bacteria for the minerals that are available in the soil. So that is why I recommend that the bacteria should be multiplied outside the field separately in a pot, and that soil in which the bacterial population has increased, that soil should be used as fertilizer or manure.
Okay. The other question is, you said sugar cane and tomato or potato together you grow mixed crop.
Yes.
Is there a list of things that one can do, because it is probably I'm just trying to learn. So in places where you don't have a lot of water, sugarcane growth may be difficult. So is there a combination of many other crops?
Yes, as I said, arhar
Hello?
has a deep root system, and it takes about 6 to 7 months to mature. So you can plant arhar in wide rows, and between the rows of arhar, you can plant any other short duration crop. You can grow onion, you can grow vegetables, whatever you want. I gave the example of arhar and bajra, but any other crop can be planted as a short duration companion crop.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Can I add for Krishnamurthy's question?
Yeah.
Krishna, if you see our traditional practices, we always have a combination the way we have in food, like cereals and legumes. So same thing, like for example, I came from a farmer's family. So we used to put even mung bean, moth bean in the pearl millet, that is bajra, or even in the jawar we used to grow. So intercropping is very traditional way of doing it. So there are a lot of combinations are available. That's what I mean. So in fact, there's a logic, because these legumes are nitrogen fixing organisms, whereas cereals are not that effective. So that combination also is very good for the soil conditioning and so on.
Okay.
Yes, if both the companion crops mature at the same time, then the advantage of mixed cropping is mainly a buffering action. So that in case one of the two companion crops is destroyed by pests or drought or over irrigation or whatever it may be, at least there is the other crop which gives the farmer some yield. But this particular thing that you said, that the legumes fix nitrogen, well, they fix it for themselves, and they don't fix it in order to give it to somebody else. So this is a fallacy where it has come even in the textbooks that the blue-green algae fix nitrogen and that nitrogen is given to rice. They don't fix it for giving it to rice. The rice actually kills the blue-green algae because they are bacteria and takes all the nitrogen from their cells.
Yeah, there is a question from one Archana. What she's asking is whether intercropping practice for a long time, will it degrade the soil?
No, soil has all the minerals that plants need. You know, if you go anywhere in the world, you will find green, healthy plants growing. So that is how I started my research, that I realized that apart from the water soluble fertilizers which the farmers are using, there must be a mechanism in nature which makes the soil minerals available to plants. And I found this mechanism to be that the plants kill the bacteria and feed on them in order to get their minerals. That is the natural thing.
Okay. So there are no other questions.
And
I have a small
no,
talk.
just let me
Please, please.
complete.
Go ahead.
What happens is this naturally occurring soil minerals have very low water solubility. That is why plants find it difficult to take it up. But the bacteria can take them up. And what actually happens is this water in the soil is called capillary water because it is held in the capillaries between the soil particles. Now, if a single molecule, this represents a saturated solution because of the extremely low solubility. The solution may have a concentration of say 5 ppm, but even if a single molecule is taken by a bacterium, that molecule is replaced from the undissolved minerals, the pool of undissolved minerals in the soil. That is why I said that soil has all the chemicals that plants need, only they are not in a form which is available to plants.
Okay, thank you. Now, I just want a small clarification, sir. Is a natural farming a part of organic farming or is it a substitute?
Well, there's a slight difference between organic farming and natural farming. In organic farming, you use, about 200 years ago, Justus von Liebig in Germany first discovered that plants have minerals, and he found what minerals they are and what mineral plays which role and all that. Since then, everybody started applying water soluble chemicals to the soil so that the plants could get them. That was the start of the chemical fertilizers. Since then, sort of a misunderstanding has grown among all scientists, and that is, the organic farmers say they apply organic manures and not fertilizers. But they analyze the organic manures and find that the amount of minerals in the organic manure is so little. Even our textbooks, they recommend that if you want to apply compost to a sorghum crop, you have to apply 100 bullock cart loads per acre. That means 40 tons per acre has to be applied to 1 acre of. So that the transport cost itself is so high that the farmers prefer to use chemical fertilizers. So I have shown now for the first time that the plants actually feed on the bacteria, and that is their source of minerals. They don't take the minerals from the soil at all.
Thank you very much. So thank you, sir. There are no other questions. We have profusely thank Dr. Karve. I mean, he has just, thank you very much for taking the time and giving a wonderful talk. Let us give him a big hand. Now, next we invite Krishnamurthy from National Chemical Laboratory, to be a young and very active experimental chemist. I would treat as an experimental chemist rather than calling him as a physical or inorganic or organic experimental chemist. A very distinguished young scientist. So I would like to hear him. I think this work is different from normally what you do, right? This is your hobby, okay, right? I guess so. So please, go ahead.
Yeah.
Krishnamurthy, you can start.
Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Madhura, for a kind introduction. I also thank the organizer. Okay, I am talking on this topic because of a misunderstanding. Okay, I come from many of my relatives are farmers, so I am usually keen on listening to farm related or agriculture related stuff. So when Dr. Karve wanted to give a talk in the mini symposium, I wanted to listen. So I requested Dr. Gopi, but he thought that I want to give a talk on agriculture. So yeah, eventually I was shocked when in the previous meeting it was decided that I will speak on agriculture. And then the next shock came when the schedule came. Yeah, when the schedule says I'm supposed to speak from 6:30 to 7:55, so 1.5 hours. So I was again shocked, but I think it's a 20 minutes talk. So I will talk about few things that I read, which may be of interest to you, and I'm hoping that to speak in such a way that you all like it. So early humans were predominantly non-vegetarian, which I think many of you are aware because they didn't have weapon. Usually they used to eat what is left over by, let's say, lion killed a deer and then what was left over. That's what they were eating. And they may have eaten fruits and trees, fruits from trees and few things like that. Largely they slept on treetop because there was no fire. So for safety, they used to sleep on top of trees. But there are now evidence that it is, so they started using bed earlier than what it was thought several years ago. Now, so this is some of the timelines. The Homo habilis were the first to use stone tools. Homo erectus was the first to control fire, and Neanderthal. So Neander is a valley in Germany. So valley is Thal in German. So that's Neanderthal, and they had an overlap with Homo sapiens over a period of over a short period, right? So. And so it turns out that the flint that was found, which is 3.3 million years ago, indicates that the human being were using stone tools than we initially thought. So they all can be clubbed into one category of hunters and gatherers. So there were no permanent settlement, that all these people can be classified into that category. Now, a Neolithic revolution is the one that started about 11,000 years ago. So this is the region where the agriculture started. It is largely it is known as Fertile Crescent, this is region. So it's basically Nile, Euphrates, and Tigris, these three rivers and river banks where the agriculture started, right? So this is the period where deforestation happened, domestication of animals, irrigation, pottery, and rectangular houses, everything started, right? So if you look at the oldest sculpture, the believed to be a sculpture is of a cow, which is the starting point of the domestication of animals. I was looking for that picture. I found it in a documentary, but I couldn't catch hold of that statue. But you can easily Google. There are the 4 cows that is in the museum, Egypt Museum, you can easily find. So the domestication started during that period. Wheat, barley, peas were grown during that period. Rice cultivation started about 6,000 years ago. So until that point, it was for necessity. The food was a necessity. When they were hunters and gatherers, it was uncertain. Once the agriculture starts, there is certain amount of surety that you get a food. And then they started making food for pleasure. For example, beer recipe was found in Iraq in a clay tablet, which is 5,800 years old poem. There, the beer recipe is found. And the beer residues were found in Iran, about 5,400 years ago. So that is where once the agriculture starts, you start making food that can be converted into pleasure. Okay, that is what was happening, which is about 6,000 years ago. Now, so women were the first early, they were the brewers, and in fact, Tenenet was a goddess of beer. There is no god; it was goddess of beer. Tenenet was the beer goddess who watched over beer brewers, right? So the pyramid builders were supplied 4 to 5 liters of beer and bread. Okay, it turned out that that's their salary. So the pyramids were not built by slaves; it was built by paid labor, and the payment was in beer. Okay, at that point, beer was considered to be the first salary. So then around the same time, the medicines also starts having beer in it. So there are hundreds of medicines which had beer in the beer as one of the ingredients. Or if there is a medicine, they say take it with beer. Like now, if you go to Ayurvedic doctor, they will tell you, usually, at least the Ayurvedic doctors I met, they will say, take this medicine with honey and lemon, like that. So beer was one of them. And so the beer were usually brewed using wheat and barley. For gods and kings, they used to make it with the dates and honey. Okay, so in a banquet, the quality of the banquet or the success of the banquet is decided based on intoxication and the amount of beer consumed. Okay, so in Egypt, Mesopotamia, this is a region where the agriculture brought in a food that is for pleasure, and it was very widely used. All of you know Tutankhamun, the child king, whose tomb has beer brewed from honey. Okay, so he had honey beer in his tomb. And one more information that I want to tell. So here is his mosque, which had pearls in the mosque, in the golden mosque. These are pearls. These pearls are from India. It's about 3,500 years ago. So the beer was also offered to gods in Egypt. Okay, so to God they offer beef, bread, and cake. To the god, the priest offer it, and then obviously gods don't eat any of the offerings. It's the priest do, right? The priest take all these offerings to home and they eat it, and it's a kind of a deadly combination, right? Carbohydrate, fat, alcohol, salt, everything that was offered to God was eaten by the priest, and they had heart attacks. So about 40 mummies were studied by University of Manchester to find out the reason for the death, and it was found out that all of them had blocked arteries. Okay, so when the human being were largely were hunters and gatherers, probably they had very little carbohydrates in it. The moment agriculture comes in, your carb content increases, and that, I think, complicates. So the priests were the one, they were eating everything, but the Egyptian population were found to be largely vegetarian diet. They were eating vegetarian diet because agriculture was sufficient, and they had food, everything. Similarly, it was interesting that Nile being there, and there were fishing carvings and all, but it seems the carbon dating studies indicate that they probably didn't eat much of fish. So agriculture was the one that also they started studying the timing. The picture that you see here is one of the oldest clocks. It doesn't give you the time like hour and minutes. It gives you the season. Okay, so the season was studied to sow the seeds and start the agriculture. So this is the early part of it, and then it became the economy, right? So tea farming. So China was the largest producer of tea, and their economy largely dependent on tea export. Okay, I'll give you the data. So this is one of the old pictures. So tea initially was drunk for medicinal purposes, and then people started drinking it for pleasure, right? So a lot of people started drinking tea, and tea tasting became a favorite pastime activity, right? So in Europe, you see the wine tasting, like similar to wine tasting, there was tea tasting in China. So by 1600, Europe started importing large quantities of tea from China, and particularly British people loved tea, and the demand was very huge. So now, if you look at what China did, China was producing about 2,500 ton, 250,000 tons of tea, and 53% was exported. So they kept it 47% for them. So if you look at the total export, 62% of China's export was tea. The remaining 38% were silk, porcelain, and glass. So 62% of their export was tea. Okay, it's one of the agriculture income, and their economy was largely so that became so that helped them to become an economic force. So then came the East India Trading Company, right? So Britain conquered India and started cultivating opium, right? So in India, what British did is they cultivated opium, and they were giving that to China. So British gave China the opium and took tea. So there was an exchange of that's a trade. In the trade, there was exchange of two agriculture produce. Now there is a problem. So Chinese people were addicted to opium, and a lot of people died. That's called opium epidemic. Okay, so because a lot of people were dying, so the Chinese emperor said British to pay in silver for tea. Right? You cannot give us opium and take tea. You please give us silver and take tea for that. British immediately agreed because the British people were addicted to tea. Right? So now the demand was so high that British could not say that no, we will not give you silver and we don't want tea. That cannot be done because the British people were addicted to tea. Obviously, exporting silver is untenable. So what East India Trading Company did was they were smuggling opium to China and access the Chinese tea. So the only Chinese port that was accessible to foreign trade was Canton Port. So Canton Port had a opium warehouse that the opium was grown in India, was exported, smuggled to China in the Canton Port. Okay, now this has two problems. Obviously, it's an illegal trade affecting the economy of China, as well as the opium epidemic didn't end because there is a large amount of opium still being smuggled in. So the Chinese emperor ordered to raid the Canton port and confiscate the opium. So I had the painting of it, but then because of space, I didn't put it. So the whole warehouse was, confiscated by the Chinese forces. Now, obviously, that's not very nice for British because British need tea and they had to find a way. And that's where there was a war. Okay, it's called the Opium War. And in that war, obviously, in that time, if you look at British won almost all the wars. Similarly, this war also, they won. Then came the Treaty of Nanjing. So Chinese paid indemnity, and it opened up 5 ports. Okay, so earlier only Canton port was accessible for foreign trade, but China had to open up 5 ports, and Hong Kong became colonial country as part of the Nanjing Treaty. Okay, so it's one of the agriculture produce was a reason, not the primary reason probably, but was one of the reasons to make Hong Kong a colonial region. Right? Then that's not enough. So British were thinking ahead. So they decided that they're going to smuggle tea seeds. Okay. So Robert Fortune was a botanist from UK. He basically from a poor background, but learned a lot by working in the farms. And he was tasked to smuggle tea plants, seeds, seedlings, everything. At that time, his salary was around $600 a year. It was a good deal, and he will have a share also in the tea trade. If he succeeds in smuggling tea plants and tea seedlings, they will be grown in India because the weather is conducive to grow that. So India, unfortunately, became part of this immoral activity, in my opinion. So so Fortune cut his hairs and dressed like Chinese. I thought Chinese were naive when I read about this history. So when I look at this painting, he doesn't look like Chinese to me, even if he cuts and puts a dress. But he pretended that he's a Chinese, and he actually succeeded in collecting 13,000 tea plants, 10,000 seeds, farming and processing tools, everything, and he shipped to India. Okay, it came to Kolkata port, and by the time it came to Kolkata port, all these tea seedlings that he collected were dead. Okay, but then he didn't give up. Okay, he continued. Fortune continued to collect, and eventually he could plant 20,000 tea seedlings in Darjeeling. Maybe we are drinking the from where it grew up. So because now India is growing a lot of these tea plants, and tea import was not necessary for Britain from China, their tea production, China's tea production fell drastically, right? And once British raided China, Dutch and Americans also raided and took tea all over the world. That's how one of the agriculture produce spread across the world. It took 170 years for the Chinese to regain the world's largest tea producer tag, right? Eventually, they became the largest tea producer, but for over a period of a century, the Robert Fortune brought misfortune to Chinese. Okay, so we also work on tea. I think I spoke about my work on how we use tea to produce supercapacitors and separation devices that I presented in the colleague in the previous Humboldt colleague. So these are some of the references that we continue to work on, that tea extracts to make scientific advances. Rubbers, this is another interesting story. This is another agriculture produce. So rubber balls were used in Mayan civilization. So these kids used to play with rubber balls. So this was made by, basically, there were trees in the South American countries where these white liquid oozes out, that was mixed with the juice that they take from a climber called the morning glory vines, and they mix it and they can make the rubber balls. They used to play, and there were games where the losing team were beheaded. Okay, that is what was happening. When the British went, they found the ball there, and obviously, British cannot resist. When they see something interesting, they will take it back to Britain, right? That's why Dr. Shashi Tharoor called the British Museum as Chor Bazaar, right? So I think he made sense. So now Joseph Priestley, the discoverer of oxygen, was the person who proposed the name rubber, and Michael Faraday, probably one of the finest scientists to walk on this earth, predicted the empirical formula of the component of the rubber. Of course, Charles Williams distilled and named it isoprene. He also wrote, so Michael Faraday interestingly wrote in his notebook that he heated rubber with sulfur. Okay, that eventually is your vulcanization that was later credited to Charles Goodyear. Several people claimed that they did the vulcanization, but the final court ruling is in favor of Charles Goodyear. So Goodyear's the Goodyear tires. So Charles Goodyear is credited for vulcanization, but of course, tire alone, the rubber alone, was not the primary reason for its success. The pneumatic tires played a definitive role in the success of these tires, right? So Robert Thomson was the first to patent, but he didn't find its application at that time. John Dunlop's work on pneumatic tires was the one that led to a boom. So now you can always question whether the internal combustion engine is important or the tires. Now, based on Tesla's car, you can probably argue that tire is most important than the internal combustion engine. Of course, you can always debate, but if tires are not there, obviously you are not going to move. You may have a fast engine, but the tires are absolutely essential to move fast. Okay. Now, in the World War, it had a great impact, right? In World War II, so Blitzkrieg, all of us know, Blitzkrieg is the rapid advance of German forces. So when I read about Blitzkrieg, I thought they were all mechanized vehicles, but it turned out, when I dig out the information, it turned out 80 infantries attacked France, but only 7 of them were mechanized, but all other 73 were horses and walking. They used a medicine, I forgot the name. I was trying to find out, I forgot to add it. So the German soldier used to take a tablet which allowed them to fight 3 days and 3 nights continuous, right? So they almost 70 hours they used to fight. There was a medicine that was used for that. So see, at that time, the natural rubber was accessible to both Axis and Allied forces somewhat equally, right? Japan had a good control in Asia. Britain had also a large amount of Asian countries like India, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, the rubber producing nations, right? But what Hitler was largely using the rubber was for his flights. Luftwaffe was there. Hermann Göring was leading the